Good afternoon. Go ahead, please.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the LGBTQ plus Lunch and Learn with the GSCC. So we're very pleased to have you with us today. I hope you have your hydration needs met and that you are getting some relief in the middle of your day and we can all spend some time together. So we'll start by introducing ourselves. So my name is Catherine Sherrick-Briggs and I'm the Assistant Director at the GSCC. I'll pass it to Warren.
Good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be here with you. Warren Shear, or War. I use the pronouns per and pers. I'm the Assistant Dean of Students and Director for the Gender and Sexuality Campus Center. Tiffany.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany Lee, and I am the Crossroads Coordinator at the GSCC.
Great. Thanks, everybody. So today we'll be kind of trading off and offering you different perspectives on some of our information for the day. So before I get moving, I want to encourage everyone to use the space as you need. So dip in and out of the stream, walk away from your computer, have your lunch, do things that make sense for you in your day. And I believe there's a chat available, and Maria can correct me. Looks like it's under comments. So please do feel free to use that. I'll be paying attention to it. We can answer questions and get a sense of the vibe and temperature check from the chat, which I look forward to. So we did some introductions. I am welcoming you. I will talk a little bit more about Pride, but happy Pride. It's the end of June. We'll roll into some land acknowledgements and space acknowledgements, talk a little bit about the Stonewall Uprising, and then do some updates from the GSCC, so state of the office. We'll break for some Q&A at that time, and then talk a lot about trends that we're seeing in LGBTQ plus student communities, both at UW and across the UW system and the Big Ten. So that's what we have for you today. And let's see, at the speed and volume at which I'm currently speaking, and if folks are using this screen, are folks able to access that? You can drop in the chat if it's working. Alternately, if things change for the AV on any of our sides, please do let us know in the chat and we'll make sure and repeat for you. So that is what we have for you, and I will pass it over to Tiffany.
Hi, everyone. So I wanted to start off with a space and land acknowledgement. We gathered today to share community in a digital format using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many Indigenous communities. This technology, which has now become central to our daily lives, leaves a significant footprint and contributes to changing climates that disproportionately affect Indigenous people. Although we are here together virtually, separated by distance in different geographical locations, collectively we all sit on Indigenous land. The University of Wisconsin-Madison occupies Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called Des Jopes since time immemorial. In an 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk were forced to cede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed when both the federal and state government repeatedly but unsuccessfully sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. This history of colonization informs our shared future collaboration and innovation. Today, UW-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation, along with the 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths every day. Thank you.
I also want to take some time for us to acknowledge the date. So today, June 28th, is the anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising. So, and for those of you who are unfamiliar, the Stonewall Uprising took place in New York City on June 28th, 1969, in which police raided the Stonewall Inn, a bar frequented by gay, lesbian, and transgender folks. And raiding and harassment was habitual, occurred on a regular basis for the patrons of the Stonewall Inn. Queer people had been arrested, roughed up in a variety of ways, according to reports at the time, and threatened with being outed publicly. On this particular night, June 28th, 1969, patrons of the Stonewall Inn resisted. They fought back against the regular harassment, the raid that happened that evening, the threat of arrests, and so on. As part of their uprising, folks were gathering en masse. People streamed out of the Stonewall Inn and began resisting via throwing objects, yelling at police, so on and so forth, pulling people away from the police as they were being arrested as well. The Stonewall Uprising is commonly regarded as the spark for the modern LGBTQ plus rights movement. However, it is important to note that it is not the first act of resistance. There were a few others that preceded the Stonewall Uprising. The Cooper's Donuts Uprising in LA in 1959, the Dewey's Uprising in Philadelphia in 1965, and the Compton's Cafeteria Uprising in San Francisco of 1966. For context, these are all establishments where queer people gathered either before they went out or after a night at bars, so on and so forth, and were regularly harassed. Places were threatened with being closed because they served LGBTQ plus people. I also want to note, and it's incredibly important to note, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, trans women of color, are touted as the first to resist, to throw something, and to organize the folks at the Stonewall Uprising, right? Acknowledging that the spark for the LGBTQ plus rights movement were trans women of color. It's incredibly important to mark the day and the ways in which the resistance that was sparked there continues to show up during Pride Month. And now we will move into additional updates from the Gender and Sexuality Campus Center.
I'll invite Tiffany to share on this slide.
We're just going to swap out our faces. Thank you. And so I just want to let you all know what we've been busy with. And so currently we are in the middle of our program coordinator search. So again, Jelani Rivera had vacated this position and we still dearly miss him. But we launched the search, then paused the search, then relaunched again. And we are now on to beginning to invite our candidates to begin interviewing. Originally, the date was supposed to be July 1st, but we're hoping for the ideal start date to be August 1st. We are also in the middle of planning our Mumble Tech 2021. So Mumble Tech is happening the weekend of October 8th to the 10th. It's also been delayed several times, and so we're so very excited that it's finally happening this year. For those of you who don't know, Mumble Tech, or the Midwest Bisexual, Lesbian, Gay, Transgender, Asexual College Conference. I always have to kind of look at it to remember the exact acronym. But it's America's largest and oldest continuously running conference for queer and trans college students. It rotates between different universities in the Midwest, and this fall we are hosting it. It will be a hybrid conference, so some of it will be available virtually, but the in-person activities and like the majority of folks will be hosted at the Monona Terrace. And the theme of this year's conference is From Protest and Beyond Pride, which I think is really fitting for what Warren was just speaking about. A group of our students chose this theme, and I think it's a really rich reflection of how a lot of our students hold and navigate their LGBTQ plus identities. I've been talking to a couple students this past month, and it's like Pride Day and Pride Month are awesome. The TikToks and the memes are awesome. The parades for those folks who are having it in person or virtually are a delight. Being able to pick up trans flag coasters and candles at Target is amazing and convenient. And also what I'm hearing from students is that there's so much more to being LGBTQ plus. And the students who are part of the planning committee were insistent on wanting to name and honor their lives and communities and histories beyond these also awesome things. So the 5 pillars the students identified for the theme of the conference are action and activism, LGBTQ plus health and well-being, queer celebration, queer histories, and solidarity or collectivity. We're currently planning programming around these pillars, and what I wanted to do today was to encourage all of you to encourage any students who you might know who might be interested to apply to present. So this conference is very specifically for students, and it's where a lot of students present for the very first time. Currently, we are accepting applications, and there's still 2 more weeks in the process. So applications will be closed at this point on July 15th. So if you know any student who would like to apply to present, please encourage them. And if students don't want to present but do want to attend, registration now is also open, so they can register to come to the conference either virtually or in person. We will have a number of free registration slots open for enrolled UW students, so please look out for that link. We're all just very excited to host and be a part of a space that will bring so many students and folks in community with each other safely after such a long period of isolation and disconnection. So if you know anyone, any student or anyone who would benefit from that experience, please share the info. Thanks.
Now to share with you some developing partnerships in addition to some new developments. So we partnered with admissions to conduct outreach to new students, in particular, those students who responded to the request for information form in the application or in the admissions process and indicated in learning about gender, sexuality, and LGBTQ plus resources at UW. We engaged via email and then invited them to 2 separate panels that we hosted with current student leaders from student organizations like queer and trans engineers, from ASM, and from Open House. We conducted both of those panels in April. Well received, lots of engagement. Students are eager to be on campus and want to know how they get connected, how to find community, how to readily identify their people. As an extension of that outreach to the incoming students, we realized that the campus center's scholarships, the scholarships we have available at the time, excluded incoming students or new students. Our existing scholarships required that students either have a UW-Madison GPA or some engagement on campus, which would exclude new students. So we decided to pivot and launch a new scholarship, which will go live on Monday, July the 5th. The awards will range from $250 to $1,000. And we fundraised via Fill the Hill and Day of the Badger. We are incredibly thankful for this opportunity, and we'll be pushing that scholarship opportunity out via WISH, or the Wisconsin Scholarship Hub, and reaching back out to the students who responded on the request for information form to let them know that it is available to them for the start of the fall. Now, another new development as an extension of an existing partnership with the Wisconsin Alumni Association. Informed by WFAA's 2-year LGBTQ plus alumni engagement strategic plan, we are partnering with Gia Gallimore and her staff on an LGBTQ plus alumni affinity group and getting that up and off the ground. We are exploring concepts around data management and how to make sure it is secure, who discloses, when folks disclose their pronouns, their partner's name, so on and so forth. It'll be an opt-in listserv that folks can join to remain connected to community, to engage around other aspects of outreach and programming and events that are forthcoming. And speaking of those program and events, we are partnering with the WFAA on homecoming again this year. So during the week leading up to homecoming, likely that Tuesday, we hope to bring in a noted LGBTQ plus alum to reconnect and engage them on campus as a part of homecoming and welcome them back into community. Additional updates. So this will be a lengthy update, everyone. My apologies. As some of you may know, the Campus Center went through a Council for the Advancement of Standards review, or a CAS review, in summer of 2019, and it was conducted from summer of 2019 to spring of 2020. It had 3 major components: an internal review team composed of 7 UW campus community members, which had 3 undergraduate students, 1 graduate student, a faculty member, and 2 staff. An external review team, which included 5 nationally recognized LGBTQ plus student services and policy experts, and an action team, or an operationalization team of 3 student leaders who set the priorities. We were working on setting the priorities and how we were going to roll this process out when COVID-19 struck and campus shut down. So as a result, this entire process was tabled was tabled in March of 2020. I want to get into some of the observations, the findings, and the priorities. So the internal review team's observations indicated that we had varied and inconsistent evaluation and assessment practices, that our funding was adequate, and I would add that with some new data relative to our peers across the Big Ten, we're Midland in our funding for student staff and funding for programming. We have, in the Campus Center, we have a lack of written policies and procedures, and that we are due or need to expand our collaboration and partners across campus to address campus climate. All really compelling. The external review team received the internal review team's observations, their findings, and all of the evidence that the internal review team reviewed in order to score the Campus Center. The external review team then was on campus around National Coming Out Day in October of 2019 and spent 2.5 days with the Campus Center, student leaders, our partners across campus, as well as student affairs leadership. They produced a report and then gave the report to us, and I'm sharing with you for the first time publicly those recommendations. So the first recommendation is for the Campus Center to consider its staffing structure, right? We need to further engage in our staff capacity for the demand in our portfolio. So the demands that campus asks of us via programming, training, engagement, consultation, follow-up, or jumping into other processes like policy analysis or creation. We need to consider, do we have the right number of staff? Do we have, things are associated or situated in the proper portfolios, things of that nature. The second recommendation is to construct a forward vision or forward-thinking vision for our physical space. When the external review team visited, we were in our previous space in 123 in the Red Gym, and we had clearly outgrown that space. We are now in 137, our new space, which doubled our square footage. And when we shared with them the plans for the new space, they wanted to know, did the new space allow for expansion? If our staff, the number of student staff or the number of professional staff grew, would the new space accommodate all of those folks? Third, to better manage training, education, and consultation demands and expectations. So as many of you may know, the Campus Center is regularly sought after to conduct trainings, to educate, to provide insight, or to consult on a variety of issues across campus. One of the things that they recommended is that we establish a few formulaic or set trainings, rather than trying to tailor every single training to every single department or academic entity that requests a training, to offer a few stock training components and then do follow-up. Fourth, assessment and data collection, both an assessment and evaluation within the GSCC and institutionally via data collection. So how are we collecting data on LGBTQ plus populations? How are we managing that data, and who has access? Are we collecting it at all? If we do collect it, who engages with it, who has access, things of that nature. And then finally, institutional investment. In particular, they highlighted in their report what they considered mission creep for a student-facing unit. So how often the campus center is sought after to help with staff concerns, faculty concerns, etc., for what is ostensibly a student-facing unit. And finally, they encouraged us to collaborate with DDEEA, or the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Educational Achievement, more. So in spring of 2020, starting in January, an operationalization or an action team was formed with 3 students and myself to set the priorities and establish timelines for operationalizing the observations and the recommendations. And there were a host of issues where the campus center could clearly grow, and we, from the internal review team, and we had the external review team's recommendations to consider. So the 3 students, student leaders from across the institution, were asked to review the internal review team's report, the external review team's report and recommendations, and then craft recommendations of their own to focus the wide array of opportunities and help establish the path forward. So the following 4 things are where the excuse me, I cannot talk today. The action team. I'm just going to say action team, everybody. My apologies. Where the action team chose for us to focus are program assessment and data collection. So for the campus center to focus a bit more on evaluating and assessing all of our small scale and large scale programs, and work on how the campus is engaged in data collection with regard to demographic data on LGBTQ plus identities. To focus in on and revamp or realign our training and education efforts. To collaborate more broadly to address campus climate concerns, and I would include in that collaborate with DDEEA. And the one that the action team added was to conduct and engage in a strategic planning effort for the Gender and Sexuality Campus Center to craft and form our future. I'll pass it over to Catherine.
Wow, thank you so much, Warren. So as you can tell, that was a real effort, and I do encourage you all to think about your questions from that slide, and feel free to drop them in the chat because we will be to a Q&A very soon. So thanks, Warren. Speaking of kind of that assessment process and what does that mean in real life or in action, of course, we have some programmatic news from the campus center, which I'll share with you. So we have some initiatives that we were able to launch during COVID or quarantine that are continuing into the fall. And so this logo here with the, it's got a picture of a book with a rainbow coming out of it. It says Out Pages across the top, LGBTQ plus fact staff directory. So that's still kicking. So outpages.lgbt.wisc.edu is there for you. And so that's both if you have had an identity development moment of your own over quarantine and would like to share that with students who are looking for support and mentorship and connection in your unit, please do make a profile. It's also a place that you can direct students to as they are navigating a very large campus and perhaps an overwhelming one as they come back in the fall, thinking about, oh, I need an advisor in chemistry, or I'm looking for someone in athletics, or who can talk to me about Slavic languages, etc. That directory is there for you. So there we go. Another piece that we were able to develop during quarantine is our Discord server. So which if I had access to the chat, I would put the small link in there for you. It's go.wisc.edu/GSCC Discord. It's also on the front page of our website. And so I know a variety of offices have implemented virtual spaces for students. And we found that ours is particularly successful, especially in some of the identity specific channels. And so we'll continue to put a lot of effort into that moving into the fall. And they are hosting virtual hangouts weekly throughout the summer. So if you have students that are like, hey, I'm new, or I'm a prospective student, or I'm coming in and want to make friends before the semester even launches, then that's there for them. And then finally, you all know about the Pronouns in Canvas initiative that was launched last January. And I wanted to point back to it because this will be the first full academic year where students who are starting their careers either as first years or, as second first years, or however we're referring to sophomores this year, will be experiencing that the entire year in all of their classes. And so remembering the elevated expectations that comes with around faculty and instructional staff, which I think Tiffany will speak to a little bit more later. Thank you for dropping that URL in there for me. Thanks very much. So yes, we'll have attention on these as we move into the fall. And part of our attention will be shared by a variety of staff support. So we have 2 social work interns that we're hosting through the School of Social Work that we've had a lot of success with this program in the fall. So I wanted to let you know we have additional staff, and we have an ongoing placement through the LGBT Chamber of Commerce. So we have a staff person who's been about half and half with the Chamber of Commerce and with the Campus Center, which has been really exciting. So that's been new as of last January, and that staff person is continuing, particularly on that conference that Tiffany mentioned. So that's kind of internal updates. Some of the external updates include a brand new floor of gender inclusive housing. If you all have not yet heard, there was a full task force, particularly led by Whitney Anderson of Open House. So shout out to Whitney in housing, who actually was the recipient of our honorary Rainbow degree at Rainbow Grad this year. Of the task force, they implemented a new floor called Gender Inclusive Community, which is a 28 resident floor in Merritt Hall. And one of the reasons for Merritt as a location was the capacity for cluster or double room restrooms, which I can speak to. And I was part of the hiring process for the house fellow, and they're all set. It's already full. Everyone was very excited. It's also exciting to offer a secondary location from Open House, which Open House is still there and still thriving. And not everyone wants to live on Lakeshore. Not everyone wants to live in a hall where people might know that that's where the LGBT or gender focused hall is. And so it offers some extra protections or some extra options for students that they want to live in a gender expansive floor, but don't want that necessarily advertised to either their parents or guardians or other people on campus. So we're really excited about this, and really, I think the benchmarking that this particular floor will be doing will really help us make the case and spread inclusive housing across campus. So we're really excited, and it feels really good to have those floors stacked full and ready to go. So given what we've shared so far, remember we talked a little bit about updates from the Campus Center. Wow, it's really me. The CAS review, a lot of those moving pieces. What are some of your questions?
We got a shout out to Whitney. Thank you, friends at CFly. So folks, if you'll post your questions in the chat.
Or Warren, Tiff, if there are things you'd like to expand on that, or we can expand on what each other has shared if that feels right too.
One of the things that I've talked to several colleagues about the CAS process before. In my section, I only really talked about what were identified as areas of growth or areas of opportunity, and didn't talk about the ways in which the internal review team indicated that the Campus Center not only meets but exceeds the criteria. Additionally, like all the kudos, to borrow language from the chat, all the kudos we received from the external review team, the things that we are doing well, a wide array of programming, attending to varied needs of a variety of students given their lived experiences was one of the places that we highlighted. We do excellent work in advocating for students. So long-term, what I will share with folks, I should say long-term, short-term, is that we will make the internal and external reports available on our website for folks to engage with. And folks can dig in and ask a few more questions on those if they'd like. I see a question in the chat. How can campus partners be helpful in achieving some of your future goals? It's a great question. Catherine or Tiffany, if you have any insight right away, please jump in.
I don't want to give too much of a spoiler for other things we're going to talk about, but here we are. I think one of the major things that I often look to campus partners for is kind of urgent and intentional response when there's something that's happened for a student. A lot of times they come to us and are like, why isn't the system working faster? I can't get a response. Folks aren't concerned about this microaggression or this thing that's happening. And so it's not exactly a policy ask, but a lot of it is how the interpersonal interaction works when the student is sharing something or disclosing something that's happened. So if you are their advisor or their, a supervisor or their mentor, et cetera, and they're like, hey, this thing happened, part of our job or our ask of others is to help speed that process along and help them feel seen and affirmed in that, because it's one of the major patterns I hear, and we can't always meet everyone's needs and be as responsive and be in every office. And so getting that from our wide kind of network of colleagues and allies is really important.
When I think about data collection, right? So when I think about our campus partners, on how many forms are we tracking or collecting demographic data? And might that demographic data, or does that demographic data include opportunities to indicate or disclose sexual orientation, the direction of someone's attraction, for example, are asking about gender in an expansive way? If it does not, why not? So asking partners to engage in that conversation. And then if they do, where does that data go? Who has access to it? Particularly if it's about students, we get asked on a regular basis how many LGBTQ plus students there are, what are their needs, so on and so forth. And we have to rely a lot on a variety of sources of data to answer those questions, and then acknowledging that we cannot fully answer those questions would be one, specific to data collection. And about partnerships, I don't think about it as often as I should. However, I know who we partner with and who we partner with well. Where are the opportunities to partner across campus? So if there are campus partners that we have not collaborated with meaningfully in a while or at all, I would hope that folks feel comfortable enough to approach us and say, we'd like to partner on something, right? And then we could spend some time generating ideas. Contributions, Tiffany?
Yeah, I think I was just thinking that this is helpful. I think to be responsive and to create a multiplicity of inclusive environments and inclusive interactions and expansive environments for folks to feel good and thrive. We have to constantly keep listening and learning from each other, from our students. I think it takes us all doing a lot of listening and a lot of learning and then implementing the best ways we can. And so, the three of us, soon to be four of us, know a lot, and we can't be everywhere and we won't know everything. And so exchanging information and just constantly trying to improve.
I will add about MIBLTech, or the Midwest Bisexual, Lesbian, Gay, Transgender, Asexual College Conference. I'm actively trying to talk too fast today. that it is a student-centric conference intended for, and there will be a track for staff, for advisors to LGBTQ plus student groups, so on and so forth. And we would welcome others to submit presentations as well. We want to actively encourage students to submit workshop proposals to present at the conference, and we would welcome others too.
I thought I saw another question pop up and disappear, but I don't see it anymore, and/or could have imagined it. Did anyone catch it?
We have demographics collection memo to share. Any questions around this?
So Warren, you had mentioned that you asked other groups to help share or help with data collection, and I asked Maria to please share in the chat, since I cannot type into it, that we do have a recommendations memo. So if you're like creating your forms for the fall, or you want to collect some information, we have some best practices, so don't be shy. So if there are questions around it, we can, but we really just wanted to let the chat know that we have that for you.
Lovely. Thanks, Catherine. Shall we continue? Because we'll have another built-in Q&A a little bit later. Great. Here we go, friends. On to trends. So, talk to you all a little bit about data and pulling data from a variety of sources wherever we can, and want to share a couple of things. One, with regard to LGBTQ plus students' mental health and well-being, LGBTQ plus students continue to experience elevated anxiety, depression, and isolation. Those findings, or rather that observation, what students are self-reporting, et cetera, are supported by the findings of the University of Maryland School of Public Health's national survey of LGBTQ plus students during COVID-19, right? So we continue to observe students make that disclosure or share that information with us. One of the other things students are sharing with us or reporting is that they are at or beyond capacity, at and beyond capacity with managing stresses of their personal lives, of school, of work, etc. That like, I am at or beyond capacity. I cannot take in anything new. I cannot move forward on the things that I am currently working on, right? And one of the things that we are navigating in the campus center is how do we maintain space or hold space for students to be at or beyond capacity and know that there are folks who still are invested in them and care about them, and continue to encourage them to pursue their goals, whatever it may be in that moment. With regard to identity and demographics, so continuation, we often rely on GLSEN's biannual school climate survey to know trends in how young people who will be joining us any given fall are identifying, right? So at a previous Lunch and Learn, we noted that there are increases in the number of folks who identify as bisexual, pansexual, asexual, and non-binary. GLSEN, or the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network's biannual campus climate survey is currently open, and we will know later this year some early findings about the ways in which LGBTQ plus young folks in middle schools and high schools are identifying. So we'll be able to report more about changes or shifts in identity, demographics, etc. And we come to belonging at UW-Madison's campus, spring 2019. The data that are the graphs, rather, I'm going to share with you are from UHS's 2019 Healthy Mind Survey. So I want to give a shout out and appreciation to Kate, Peter, and Rionda for making these data available to us. And I want to share with you all that we are going to dig specifically into LGBTQ plus populations, right? And so from that same survey, approximately 19% of the respondents are in communities. And by that, I mean identified with or within LGBTQ plus identities, right? Or self-indicated an identity that we would place with LGBTQ plus populations. So up next are two visualizations. We're going to, one, I want to acknowledge that the x-axis is I see myself as part of the campus community, and the y-axis is I have a group, community, or social circle at UW-Madison where I feel I belong. I feel at home, known, connected to, and supported in my identity. So up first, gender. Right, so I want to invite folks to observe the lower left-hand corner and the low sense of belonging, and the upper right-hand corner is a high sense of belonging. Right, and note that gender diverse populations or gender expansive populations, gender queer, gender non-conforming, trans women, trans men are in the lower left quadrant. And closer to a lower sense of belonging with regard to being on UW-Madison's campus. To give folks a time to engage with this and reflect on it, right? Invite folks to note or track whatever questions are coming up for you, right? Comparing, if you will, gender expansive folks relative to their non-gender expansive peers. And then I will shift to sexual orientation. Again, low sense of belonging in the lower left-hand corner, high sense of belonging in the upper right-hand corner. The unlabeled dot is queer questioning or self-identified, noting where broadly queer identified folks are relative to their non-queer peers. Again, note what is your response? What is moving you? What questions do you have? And I will shift and turn it over to my colleagues.
Perfect, thank you. And so I think a phrase that we keep using in the office is "they're here" or "they're almost here." A very large incoming class is coming to campus, both a large class of incoming freshmen, but also a large number of second-year students who have never really been on campus, and we all just want to be ready for them. As my little sister likes to summarize, folks just keep getting gayer and greater. And she is not a data scientist, but she is on to something. Currently, trends are showing that younger folk are increasingly identifying with the LGBTQ plus community, as Warren kind of pointed to. A recent Gallup poll said that 15.9% of folks born between 1997 and 2002 identify as LGBTQ plus. And we are waiting for that the other survey to see what the more recent data is. So I'm naming both of those things to say that we have a large group of students coming here, and that we know a significant percent of folks around that average age group are identified as LGBTQ plus. And so at that intersection, we are anticipating a lot of LGBTQ plus students coming in the fall. We're naming that because a lot of students who are joining us will have high expectations and high skills, and assume staff and faculty are competent and ready. And I can like give my own, I think when I have trainings, I give this own example. My sister and I are about 10 years apart, and I got my master's in gender and women's studies, and a lot of the language and frameworks and inclusive practices and just understanding of identity I got through a graduate education, and she had access to that and gained that through high school and the folks that she was around and the communities that she was a part of. And so I'm naming my own self of like this age difference of expectations and proficiency and competency when it comes to creating inclusivity. And wanting to be as ready and welcoming for the folks who are coming and the students who are already here. I just want to keep reminding you that our website has a ton of resources in case you want to look at some website materials, some worksheets. We have a bunch of resources on our website to see how to create more inclusive environments, whether you're an advisor, whether you have a classroom, whether you're in an office. So I just wanted to name that off the bat. The other thing that we've been thinking a lot about in the office is about COVID and how the pandemic has specifically affected LGBTQ plus students and ourselves being a part of the LGBTQ plus community. And so we've been asking folks, reflecting on our own experiences, reading up, and what we found are a couple of different things. And so one is that for a lot of folks, the pandemic has allowed them to space to find parts of their identity that they didn't know before. And so, you know, when you don't have to go outside and be seen and with particular expectations, maybe that has opened up a part of your identity that you didn't experience before. And so we've talked to some folks who are like, wow, actually, like, I am now, you know, I'm now identifying as this, and the pandemic has allowed me to witness and experience and honor that. A second trend that we found is that the pandemic has exacerbated existing mental health concerns. So the isolation of the pandemic and the isolation has caused, like, if you were struggling with depression, we've seen that that has been increased. And so that's another trend that we're finding. A third trend that we've seen is that folks are wanting connection now that there are options for safely gathering and connecting. Folks are wanting to find community, find other LGBTQ plus folks, and connect. And so that's why we're excited about the fall and we're excited about the conference. And so all three of these things, whether it's discovering another part of your identity, a part of yourself, a part of your essential self, or wanting community, it all kind of comes down to, for us, at least in the office, creating spaces for connection. So we want to both create a safe space for folks who are just stepping into this community, that they have a space to talk about it and talk with folk. We want to create the space for folks who are like, actually, I'm not ready for large interactions yet. Like, I have been isolated for so long and I just need one-on-one connection. We're trying to create spaces for those folk, kind of like me, who are like, actually, a large room is still something that's going to give me anxiety right now. And we want to create the space for folks who are like, no, I am ready. I am ready to safely mingle and connect with a bunch of different people. So these are the different trends we are trying to be responsive to and attentive to and listen to. And it's a lot. And I'm sure a lot of us across campus are holding similar layers that we're trying to plan from and with and around. So I just wanted to give you an update of some of the trends that we're seeing and how we're trying to plan with them. and I'll pass it off to KCB.
Thanks, Tiffany. I really appreciate that. I think both generationally and temporally, right? So like the young people and the pandemic is, as people are saying, like everyone's gay now, right? So I think that'll be really an interesting demographic shift as we're moving into the next couple of years of being providers for those folks. So I wanted to share a little bit about what I mentioned earlier, how this is not specific to UW in a lot of ways, right? So external across our institutional partners. So our peers across the Big Ten are encountering very similar trends. So directors of LGBTQ services meet, directors of Big Ten LGBTQ plus services meet and confer and figure out what are the trends and what's moving forward. And there are, I think probably for the third time you're hearing this today, a lot of expectations of pre-existing knowledge. So you need to know what pronouns are, you need to know that there are a variety of identities that will continue to shift, and that inclusive housing is important, and prompt response to bias reports is important, right? So this higher and elevated expectation, particularly for folks who have already been organizing or invested or involved in their GSAs or gender and sexuality alliances in their K-12 environments. So pre-existing knowledge from faculty and staff, this immediate response to concerns, which I did talk a little bit about earlier, but again, I don't think it's an expectation of perfection, right, around any number of things, but rather of responsiveness. And so I hope that helps people in the room today think about, it's less about you need to memorize a lot of pronouns and memorize a lot of terms, and if you do it wrong, then you're canceled, right? But rather that when something happens, there's just a culture of apology and correction and naming the impact and moving forward, right? Which is really the way to be in community and do that trust building that allows folks to get served and have their needs met. So those are some moving pieces, and also this ask of attention to middle identities. So I used to play viola and orchestra. That's a middle voice, right, between kind of the bass and cello and the violin voices. So thinking about trivia, thinking about pansexual, bisexual, fluid identities, non-binary identities, asexual spectrum folks, so gray A, ace, demisexual, et cetera. So this idea of some of the more moving pieces around identity affairs and how can we bring a lot of attention to those. So right now we have channels for that in the Discord, for example, and we'll continue to do in-person programming in the fall. And some of this attention to the middle identities is less about the continuing division of identity categories into very specific communities and more about what Tiffany was describing and more into around the data in terms of a desire for connection, right? So the ask isn't that if you have, an LGBT flyer in your office, that now you have, 5 different flyers for 5 different new middle identities, but it's rather about how can folks feel meaningfully connected to ameliorate some of the anxiety that's kind of dividing folks into further and further identity categories. So, which is all to say that all 3 of the bullet points here are things that that I think we try to be consistent around and try to offer you all as our campus partners a lot of support around. So we are here for you. So not just the Big Ten, but across the UW system. So we have a consortium of many providers across the system, and we are very lucky here at UW-Madison around staffing, space, and funding, right? And that's just not the case for our system peers. And so many offices have no budget or have very little budget, or their directors or staff are being assigned elsewhere and their duties are being divided. And so there's that impact of being deprioritized, right? What does that look like for the students? How does that land on staff that also are at capacity? So we do work together. We try to work on initiatives together as a consortium, which include things like recommendations for the Canvas pronouns across the 13 institutions, and sometimes looks more social, like making sure that those staff and students are involved in the Mumble Tech planning process. So just letting folks know that, especially for transfer students and other students that are coming to us from those institutions or from communities where those institutions are, they may have a little bit of a culture shock coming here where we are more highly resourced. So we talked about Big Ten, UW system. There's also just a larger kind of discourse, which Tiffany spoke really beautifully to earlier, around it's really nice to be able to buy stuff at Target, and also what is the larger impact of that, of the trend of institutions capitalizing, literally, right, under capitalism, on queer and trans identities, or at least symbols, for a month, and not meaningfully offering material resources. So rather than, do you have, I think you said, trans flag coasters available for purchase, what are your restroom policies in your stores, and does everyone make a living wage, and is there meaningful health insurance, right? I've seen a lot of TikToks of Starbucks employees saying, hey, like, Starbucks covers transition care in their health insurance, so you should work there. And that's meaningful, right, compared to offering Pride mugs for sale at the Starbucks checkout. And it can be both and, but we're identifying it as a trend of the larger discourse, as a little bit of impatience with dropping a rainbow on things in order to make some money, and rather, how is this going to impact our lived realities? And our, meaning folks across the spectrum of race, class, ability, access, right? Pinkwashing, so we also mentioned pinkwashing here, so rainbow capitalism and pinkwashing. So that phrase has a storied history, but in this context means, putting an ally sticker on something, or saying we're LGBT inclusive without attending to any other facets of identity, at which point you can't be LGBT inclusive if you're not inclusive of all the things. So a nice visual for this, if it's helpful, is if maybe you're on State Street and there's a like love is love, or a rainbow sticker that says everyone's welcome here on the door, and then it says restrooms only for paying customers, right? It's a little jarring for folks that are like, yeah, and LGBTQ youth are disproportionately represented in homeless populations, and like communities of color have higher percentages of queer and trans people in them than white communities, and are more impacted by capitalism, et cetera. So how can we make everything fit together, because they're not single issues? And of course, we don't live single issue lives. So students and communities in general are seeking change and material resources, acknowledging both and for many of those elements. And so Warren was able to pull this quote for us as another kind of moving piece, and it says, allyship is not allyship if it is conditional, especially if it prioritizes the ally's comfort, right? So this conditional allyship of you can be included as long as you're a paying customer, for example, or as long as you play respectability politics, or as long as it only lasts through June, et cetera. And then thinking about this right to comfort on the solidarity or allyship side, and how do we push ourselves to center the students' needs and center community needs in order to really get everyone's needs met. So it's a little soapboxy, but I wanted to give you all a sense of what are some of the moving pieces outside of just our silo at UW, of both our peer institutions and the larger discourse. Which I do believe leads us into our Q&A part 2. So I'll invite Warren and Tiffany back. It looks like there is one comment or one question in the comments so far. How do we help students recognize we are safe people to talk to? Often students don't know they could talk to advisors about these kinds of things, or that we can help connect them with resources. My pride flags and my background only go so far. So Warren, Tiff, thoughts on this?
So I have, my immediate thought is, right, like at one point in time in my career, I would tell folks that like use a variety of queer coded things, and young people have learned, like to get the point rather that Catherine made before, young people have learned that not everyone who is rocking a trans flag, so on and so forth, or the Philly Pride flag, for example, actually meaningfully includes everyone or is fully present, right? So there would be other ways to demonstrate, I think, in the course of like not only the visual cue, but the language, right? So like how you are communicating, are you intentional about disclosing your pronouns and, asking someone else theirs? If you don't know someone's pronouns, are you intentional about acknowledging, I don't know their pronouns, so I'm going to use they, them in lieu or until I know or learn their pronouns, for example. I also think that to the point that Catherine just made, like folks are wanting to see what you are doing, right? Like how are you clearly communicating that, like, I am vested, I am here to upend systems of oppression and marginalization that adversely impact folks, including those that continue to keep me in comfort. Like, how do you demonstrate that, right? And I can't tell you how to demonstrate that because I don't know what you're doing. Tiffany, Catherine?
Yeah, I also do think that, like, a pride flag does do something. I actually think that, like, I do think that, like, a pride flag, as much as I, like, just dragged it, like, 30 minutes ago, I'm bringing it back around to say that it has value and purpose. Because we live in a both and world. And I think that, like, so putting pronouns, putting your pronouns on your name tag and in your email signature. And this is a reflection on my own part, is that I've been trying to reflect on, like, if I'm in my own entitlement to people either not necessarily, like, coming out to me, but, like, sharing these parts of themselves with me. And so if someone doesn't, am I, like, feeling entitled that they did or didn't like share this aspect of themselves with me, or their identity? And so I think very specifically for my role, like, wanting to be able to provide folks and students with resources. And sometimes that resource isn't, like, a conversation with me where they have to get vulnerable and, like, share the things. And so if you are in a role where it's just, like, you are offering resources, like, making sure, like, all of your students have access to that resource. Like, so if you're sharing a resource list and one of them is about, like, food insecurity, also sharing our website where it like will give them access to resources around their identity. And so, yeah, I'm like, for me, it's about, like, letting folks know the space is there, and then also letting folks do whatever they want with that space, and trusting their agency around that, and trusting their own desires around that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, Tiffany. I think about how do we, because I'm hearing what you're saying about, like, providing the same things to everybody because you never know what they're going to need. And, like, I think about also, like, unwritten rules. I don't know as much about advising, so thanks, Alyssa, for mentioning advising. But I think it's fine to say, and I'm here if you want to talk about things like race, gender, food insecurity. I mean, only say things you actually can talk about, right? You don't want to elevate people's expectations and then not be able to deliver. But it's more like, if you need support around your about getting connected to McBurney or the GSCC or the Dean of Students office, remember, I'm always here for that. We can spend some time on those things. So I think being explicit is fine. And I think also a strategy that I use, either with a one-on-one conversation or a one-off conversation with a student, or in my longer-term relationships with students, is at the end of whenever we're talking, or if there's a lull, I'll say, what else are you thinking about? Or what else would you like to share about or update me on today, or whatever it is. So always making some empty space. Kind of reminds me of when you're, like, driving in a car. It's easier to talk to somebody because you're both looking forward and kind of, like, not looking at each other. It's the same idea of, like, and is there anything else you're thinking about today, or where else would you like to spend some time? Because especially as you continue to trust build, there may be things that come out that didn't come out the first couple times while they're still doing a temperature check, or because a lot of times students don't share until there's something going on that's a crisis, right? Not to keep using analogies, but if you ever keep a journal and you, like, write about all the bad stuff and maybe, like, don't get around to writing about the good stuff because you're off living your life. So we might hear more from students when they actually need us in crisis and less about when things are going well. So I'm making that space that's always there so they know it's going to be there the next time you meet.
Other questions, thoughts, concerns, affirmations, accusations, protestations?
Or ways that you have had those conversations that have worked well that you'd like to share with the room.
Catherine and Tiffany, as we're waiting for folks to formulate questions, anything else move or bubble up for you that you want to share?
Maybe I'll briefly share that I've heard from many students, or we have heard from many students that a lot of their access needs were met better by COVID interventions, and they're experiencing a lot of distress that those are no longer going to be available, at least not in the same way. And it's also something we've anticipated the whole time. They're like, we know that everyone is getting accommodations because everyone wants it, including the able-bodied people. And then when the able-bodied people are done wanting it, then we're going to go back to me not getting what I need. And so we've been trying to work with them on distress tolerance and anticipation and planning, or to Gabe's framework, anticipate, withstand, and cope, right? And I'm sharing that now because if you all are in environments where you're meeting with students or offering programming, and I'm sure you're already doing the best you can with planning a hybrid future. And that's very important to a lot of our students, is can they still have their one-on-ones with you online, or will there be a meaningful way for them to engage with your office externally, because their access needs are not going away. And I think they feel a little bit abandoned, and that does contribute to the isolation that we share data with how our populations are already experiencing.
Give it about another minute or so.
Like, this is the face I had when I was a TA, just kind of waiting. And sometimes there aren't questions, you just wait it out. I think the only thing that I would say, I think there's like a shared anticipation for all the students coming. Like, it's like both exciting and anxiety. And yeah, I want it to happen so that it can just happen, and all the like scenarios in my head will go away and it'll just be the thing. But I'm excited. I'm excited about the conference. I'm excited about the fall. And am looking forward to rebuilding and continually building community, whatever, and I'm open to whatever that might look like as it moves forward. Yeah. But I think that's my last tidbit.
I was just, when you said that, Tiffany, I was thinking about the incoming first year class, and in my mind, what I'm processing is the other first year class. So the sophomores, or the rising sophomores, who did not have a traditional first year residential experience. And perhaps I'm projecting a bit, right? And assuming that folks are going to be seeking connection on a variety of levels, in a variety of ways, and wanting to know that we can meet that need for the students, right? Like, how do we assess and discern when the student wants a more individualized or more one-on-one connection, and we can provide that? And how do we ascertain if they want perhaps a less intense or less intimate connection, but still want a connection? So like connecting them to a larger group, or more activities at which they might meet people. Thinking about that as routes to address the anxiety, depression, and isolation that we talked about earlier, the students have been managing over the last year and a half, that we have been managing over the last year and a half. Like, how do we facilitate that and ensure those connections? So I think about that constantly. I don't have any great ideas right now, but I think about it constantly. Catherine, any tidbits from you before we wrap?
No, I appreciate the space, and I recognize that people process at different speeds, and we have a lot going on. So if there are things that pop up for you after this conversation, or you'd like some more context or a one-on-one on any of the bullet points we talked through, like, I'd very much like to talk to you, right? Like, I don't think the students are the only ones that end up feeling isolated. So please don't be shy. We're in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from 10 to 4, including with student staff if you'd like to talk to them. And of course, we'll be resuming in the fall.
Wonderful. Thank you, Catherine. Cooperate. Everyone, I want to thank you for your time and attention today. Appreciate the time you spent with us. Please feel free to reach out to us, as Catherine mentioned, stop by Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 10 to 4. You can find us on the website or reach out to us via email, lgbt@studentlife.wisc.edu. Feel free to stop by. Red Gym, we're in 137. Do not follow the signage that is currently available to you in the Red Gym. It'll lead you in the wrong direction. Scan and look for the rainbow flag. You'll find us. And as always, I want to close with encouragement for you all to stay hydrated, and a reminder to offer support and affirmation of everyone around you, including the person in the mirror. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you on campus. Bye.
Thanks, Warren. And yes, to Ice Cream Social, first day of class, do not miss.
In the Palo Santo courtyard, no less.